The eldest miss of the Chi family, Chiyu, has been plagued by various disasters since her birth. Car accident, kidney failure, experts assert that she will not live to be 18 years old. Fortunately, everyone around her loved her as much as they could, indulging her bad temper and spoiling her into a domineering little princess. But one day, she unintentionally opened a book and found out that she was a child stolen by the Chi family, just to be a ghost for the true daughter to block the disaster. The daughter of a cook who was born on the same year, month, and day as her is the eldest miss of the Chi family. They lifted her up to the clouds and were despised and cursed by countless people, only to declare that the innocent girl was the true master after her death. She desperately wanted to change her fate, but was stopped by a mysterious force. Destined to die on her 18th birthday. Chiyu turned black in despair. Since I have no choice but to die easily, don't expect to live a peaceful life either. She became increasingly harsh and arrogant, causing her assistant to admit her mistake and kneel down, disrupting the billion-dollar order of the culprit uncle. They are angry, and helpless. If you want the cook's daughter to live, you can't touch her. Everyone hates her, except for the new bodyguard who has no brain to defend her to the end. Miss, you scold me well, you scold me cleverly, you scold me foolishly. Chiyu. Although he looks a bit awkward, it doesn't mean he's quite cute, does it? On his 18th birthday, just as Chiyu decided to accept this damn fate, a high-ranking family in the imperial capital came to acknowledge his lost daughter. Keywords of the novel. The malevolent young lady who has been raised and deposed awakens without a pop-up window. The malevolent young lady who has been raised and deposed awakens. Download the complete TXT collection, and the malevolent young lady who has been raised and deposed awakens. Read the latest chapters. Chapter 1. Half a year left to live. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Half a year left to live. Without warning, Chiyu fainted on the playground. At that time, while attending physical education class, she discovered that Ning Jin was wearing limited edition running shoes that she had air freighted from the UK a few days ago. I have instructed my servant to wash it, but I haven't had time to wear it yet. Faced with Chiyu's stern questioning, Ning Jin blushed and took off her shoes on the spot, apologizing to her. Sorry miss, maybe the maid accidentally took the wrong shoes while collecting them. I thought this was the new running shoes my mother bought me. What do you think? I think you're blind. Chiyu sneered, take the wrong shoes, take the wrong clothes, take the wrong backpack. What are you going to take the wrong next? She spoke too harshly, and Ning Jin couldn't help blushing with embarrassment. Classmates whispered and sympathized with Ning Jin, but due to Chiyu's identity, no one dared to speak up for Ning Jin. Then the person who can speak out against injustice came. Jin Yao from Class 7, Chiyu's fiancé and Simo's school bully. Jin Yao was originally playing basketball on the nearby basketball court when he saw a group of people gathered together. The bad feeling prompted him to let go of his teammates and run over. Chiyu's voice was neither high nor low, enough for Jin Yao to hear it clearly. The insult stirred up a wave of anger in Jin Yao's heart. He pushed aside the crowd and walked up to Chiyu, coldly ordering her, apologize to Ning Jin. Chiyu remained expressionless and said, why? Based on these shoes, I bought them for her. Oh. Chiyu laughed. She looked at her handsome fiancé, her seductive cat eyes slightly widened, with a curious expression. She didn't say that this was bought by her mother for her, why did she deceive everyone? Are you feeling guilty? And why did you buy such expensive shoes for her? Aren't you my fiancé? Are you two-legged now? You. She tilted her head and sneered, where did you go? Chiyu. Jin Yao growled uncontrollably, his handsome face slightly twisted. Do you have to be so annoying? Chiyu was too lazy to pay attention to him and casually bent down to Ning Jin, saying, I'm sorry, I just slandered you. In front of her classmates, Ning Jin appeared very kind and waved her hand, saying, it's nothing. Before finishing his sentence, he was interrupted by Chi-yu with a smile on his face. Where did you take the wrong shoes? This is the person who took the wrong shoes. Can I be more magnanimous and give you Jinyao? Ning Jin was taken aback and shed tears of injustice on the spot. Jinyao and I are innocent. Miss, you can't tarnish my reputation. Upon hearing these words, Chi-yu covered his stomach and couldn't close his mouth with a smile. Fame. You thief who always takes my things have the face to talk about reputation. The more she spoke, the more she went too far. Jinyao couldn't bear it and shouted, That's enough. That's enough for you, Grandpa. Chi-yu withdrew his smile and said coldly to Jinyao, I will tell my uncle that the engagement between the two families has been terminated. From now on, you can treat her well without any restraint and no one will stop you. Jinyao had already had enough of her bad temper, and his emotions immediately rose upon hearing this. That's really great. On the day of the termination of my engagement, I'm going to set off 10,000 cannons to celebrate. Please have all my classmates witness me regain my freedom and finally get rid of you, this arrogant and domineering big. He was venting his emotions happily when he suddenly saw Chi-yu fall straight down. No one went to pick up Chi-yu. Everyone, like Jinyao, hates this arrogant and self-righteous young lady. It was Ning Jin who rushed forward at the first moment and nervously patted Chi-yu's face. Mississippi Miss, what's wrong with you? Jinyao stepped forward and pulled her apart with a cold expression, saying, It's mostly just a show. Don't pay attention to her, let's go. No way. Ning Jin tightly grasped his hand and spoke anxiously, I have to take Miss to the hospital, otherwise she will die. Why does she always repay kindness with kindness, being so humiliated by Chi-yu, and still wholeheartedly considering her? Too kind, you will suffer losses. Jinyao's face flashed with helplessness, then it's for your sake. Chi-yu was taken to the hospital. In less than half an hour, the person in charge of the Chi family rushed over upon hearing the news. The doctor was performing surgery inside, and the tall and handsome man scrutinized Jinyao calmly, asking him coldly, How did Chi-yu faint? Jinyao has always been afraid of Chi-he, and when he touched his cold gaze, he somehow felt a bit lacking in confidence. Although Chi-yu's fainting had nothing to do with him, Chi-he's gaze seemed to confirm that it was his fault. Jinyao hesitated for 2 seconds before Ning Jin stepped forward and helped him out. The sun in the afternoon is too strong. Miss should have a slight heatstroke, it's not a big deal. Chi-he's gaze fell on her, cold and without warmth. Are you a doctor? His sarcasm made Ning Jin blush on the spot and he shook his head with a moan, I'm sorry, second master, I talked too much. Jinyao couldn't bear to see Ning Jin being wronged, so he shouldered the strong aura of a man and said coldly, she fainted on her own and has nothing to do with anyone. Chi-he's eyes were dark and filled with a heart-wrenching anger. Is it okay? Your parents need to explain to me. Jinyao was most annoyed by others using his parents to kidnap him. He wanted to argue with Chi-he, but was grabbed by Ning Jin's wrist. Don't say anything more, Ning Jin gestured with her eyes not to provoke Chi-he, as that would be of no benefit. Jinyao was about to speak up when the door to the operating room opened. Ning Jin was more nervous than anyone else and rushed to the doctor with one swift step, anxiously asking, Doctor, is my young lady okay? The doctor did not respond to her, but looked at Chi-he. Chi-he made a gesture, and the doctor followed him to the side. Jinyao didn't take it seriously and said, It seems like she's seriously ill. Ning Jin stood behind him, with a glimmer in her eyes. Chi-yu must not have any accidents, otherwise she will definitely be very sad. Chi-yu woke up, it was already evening. She heard someone talking in the ward in a daze. At most for 6 months, her heart and lung weakness rate has worsened. If there is anything she wants to do but not do, please try to be satisfied. What half a year? I hope to extend her lifespan as much as possible, at any cost, said Chi-he's voice. That's nature. Originally we were discussing her condition. Does she still have 6 months to live? Chi-yu lay on the hospital bed, his expression calm, with only one pair of eyes, filled with deep despair. Why did the heavens give her a body plagued by illness, tormenting her from memory onwards? Chi-yu is still young, only 17 years old this year. When someone else's life has just begun, she is forced to accept the arrival of death. She had everything going wrong and was unlucky in every way, as if she was born a sinner who was not allowed by nature, bearing malice from all over the world. Why are you targeting her like this? The water cup at the bedside was knocked to the ground, which alarmed Chi-hee, who was discussing his condition with the doctor. Chi-hee walked quickly to the bedside and pushed Chi-yu, who had lifted the blanket and got out of bed, back down. He comforted him, you need to rest. Chi-yu pushed aside his hand and insisted on getting out of bed. Chi-hee is not allowed. The two were sawing together, and Chi-yu screamed in anger, biting Chi-hee's hand hard with his mouth open. Chi-hee felt pain, but did not make any sound. He watched the girl's thin and weak shoulders tremble slightly, and a hot tear fell on the back of his hand. His thin lips pursed tightly and he hugged her into his arms. Chi-yu tightly grabbed Chi-hee's clothes and couldn't help but burst into tears. Uncle, help me. I don't want to die, I want to live well, sobbing. Chi-hee patted her back and comforted her softly. Uncle won't let you die. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Termination of marriage with the Jean family. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Termination of marriage with the Jean family. Chi-yu was so emotionally agitated that he couldn't control himself. Chi-hee was worried that she would keep crying and hurt her body, so he asked the doctor to give her a sedative injection. Chi-yu opened his eyes again and saw several more people in the ward. The Jean couple brought Jean Yao over and apologized to Chi-yu. Io was momentarily confused, but his mind only spoke those words. Auntie has already scolded him, and you have a lot. For Auntie's sake, please forgive him. Women are so talkative that they don't leak any water in all aspects. To show weakness openly is actually forcing Chi-yu to eat this piece of shit. If she doesn't eat, it's just impolite. Chi-yu smiled as she avoided the woman's outstretched hand and spoke coldly, Who are you? Why should I give you face? As soon as these words were spoken, the whole room fell silent. Mrs. Jin's face was full of colors, and her expression was not brilliant. Jean Yao's father coughed heavily, and due to Chi-hee's presence, he didn't say much. Jean Yao was furious, gritting his teeth and glaring angrily at Feng Tang. You're really uncivilized. Apologize to my mother. Chi-yu blinked his eyes and looked innocently at Chi-hee, pitifully saying, Uncle, he said I have no manners. As is well known, Chi-yu's parents passed away shortly after her birth. Chi-yu was raised by Chi-hee alone. Jean Yao cursed two people with one sentence. Chi-hee's face turned cold as he said, Your mouth may be too much on your face. Mrs. Jin's heart thumped as she gave her angry son a warning look and quickly apologized to Chi-hee with a pleasing smile. Mr. Chi, I'm really sorry. This stinky kid speaks without any restraint. I'll definitely teach him a good lesson when I go back. If Yu wants to recover, we won't stay much longer. We'll set up a table at the hotel another day to compensate Yu. She said goodbye to Chi-yu, and he suddenly regained his composure. He waved his hand and sweetly said, Uncle and Aunt, take your time. When Jean Yao was about to leave, he gave Chi-yu a fierce glance and became extremely disgusted with her. Chi-yu didn't even give him a glance. She felt that Jean Yao had never fully recognized his position from beginning to end. The Jean family's fortunes have declined, and in recent years, they have managed to maintain their surface beauty by climbing up to the Chi family and picking up small fish and shrimp that have leaked from their fingers. To put it simply, the Jean family is selling their son for glory. If Jean Yao is smarter, even if he pretends, he should have a better attitude towards Chi-yu. But he had a funny illusion that his position was equal to that of Chi-yu. This is so foolish that there is no cure. If it weren't for Mrs. Jean being more upscale, she would always go to the Chi family to give away many mountain delicacies and various flatteries during holidays and festivals. Who is his Jean family? He's not even worthy of serving as a pawn for the Chi family. Now it's okay, Jean Yao is shameless. Mrs. Jean doesn't know if it's because the Jean family's business has improved in the past 2 years. She thinks it's better to sit on the same level as the Chi family, and her words and actions have become more self-indulgent. Chi-yu pondered that it was time to kick open the Jean family. What are you thinking? He poured a glass of water and handed it to Chi-yu. Chi-yu looked at the man who was hurting her so much, shook his head, and pulled him to sit by the bedside. He didn't know why, but the next second, the little girl's head leaned against his shoulder. Chi-yu said, "Uncle, let's terminate our engagement with the Jean family." Something flashed through Chi-he's eyes and quickly disappeared. He touched Chi-yu's head and laughed indulgently. "What's wrong? You're still angry with Jean Yao. Uncle, find time to treat him and vent your anger." Chi-yu was too lazy to explain the filth between Jean Yao and Ning Jean, as those two were not worthy of wasting their saliva. "I don't like him at all, and..." Chi-yu said suppressively, "Since we can't live for 6 months, don't drag others down. You are..." Chi-he's face suddenly darkened and he didn't want to see her give up like this. "Uncle said it will cure you." These words have been heard by Chi-yu since he was 6 years old. She is tired of listening. Chi-yu didn't want to blame his little uncle for his dishonesty. He dotes on her, gives her the best material in the world, tolerates her bad temper, and spoils her like a princess. It can only be said that fate is like this. The heavens cannot tolerate Chi-yu and must make her die. Chi-yu would target all negative emotions towards outsiders, but he would not throw a tantrum at Chi-he. She pulled out a smile, and her delicate and beautiful face was a masterpiece favored by God. Charming and beautiful, luxurious and beautiful. Chi-he's deep eyes darkened. Chi-yu-chang smiled nonchalantly and said, "I have always believed in Uncle. He has been with me for 2 days, and the company's affairs have piled up. With him on Chi-hun's afternoon plane, Uncle can rest assured to return to the company. Chi-hun is the bodyguard assigned by Chi-he to Chi-yu. He went out a few days ago and happened to be back today." Chi-he noticed that Chi-yu was in a bad mood and decided to give her some private time to digest her emotions. "Uncle, listen to you. The hospital is boring. Do you want to find something to relieve your stress?" Chi-yu was absent-minded and said, "Then come and find some books to read." "Okay." After Chi-he left, Chi-yu fell asleep in melancholy. She had a terrible nightmare and sat up from the bed, sweating profusely, panting heavily. "My face was icy cold, and those were tears of fear." The hospital room was silent and dark, like a cold coffin. Chi-yu got out of bed feeling dark and turned on all the lights in the room. The daytime indoor environment finally brought her a sense of security. "There is no popularity in the room, and I always feel a chill piercing through my bones." Chi-yu spoke up and called Chi-hun, thinking he was not in the room, but waiting outside. I didn't hear his response as a result. Chi-yu's eyebrows furrowed little by little, and she clearly remembered that Chi-hui had a plane at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. He should have come to the hospital long ago. What is the situation now? The unread information gave her the answer. 40 minutes ago, Chi-hun sent a message to Chi-yu stating that there was an urgent incident that he had to deal with. This message is more of a unilateral notice than a request to Chi-yu. "I haven't received a reply from Chi-yu, at least make a phone call. Our bodyguard doesn't have this kind of consciousness. I don't know if it's an illusion, but Chi-yu always felt that this bodyguard who had been with him for 7 years had become increasingly lazy in the past year. Is it because of the only dignity she gave him, relying on favor and pride? Or does he consider himself barely a person?" Chi-yu was angry in his heart, but he did not call to question. She is waiting for him to come back and will definitely help him recall the consequences of his previous self-proclaimed actions. There are several hardcover books in front of the hospital bed. Chi-yu glanced casually and then looked away with boredom. She said she wanted to read a book, but it was just a perfunctory gesture from Chi-hee. When it comes to entertainment, it's better to play 2 games. Chi-yu thought so and went to get his phone. Suddenly, something flashed. She fixed her gaze and saw the book in the middle emitting a dazzling golden light. Chi-yu is in high spirits. Did Chi-hee prepare a surprise for her? She pulled out the book and strangely found that it had no cover, let alone a title. Out of curiosity, Chi-yu opened the book cover and started reading. At first, Chi-yu wanted to use it to pass the time. 10 minutes later, her face changed. The speed of flipping through became rapid. In half an hour, Chi-yu's world collapsed. This book absurdly records a shocking secret. Surprisingly, Chi-yu is not the miss of the Chi family. Ning-jin, the daughter of the kitchen maid whom she despises the most, is the legitimate miss of the Chi family. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. The Truth That Cannot Be Expressed. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. The Truth That Cannot Be Expressed. When people joke that Chi-yu and Ning-jin were born on the same year, month, and day, but with different fates. Chi-yu felt fortunate in his heart. She was born with many illnesses and disasters, hovering on the brink of death countless times. If it weren't for the prominent family background, the expensive treatment costs would be negligible for the Chi family. If she were born into an ordinary family, she would probably have been abandoned by her parents long ago. Chi-yu never expected that she could actually have a healthy body and grow up safely and happily. And you don't have to worry about being kidnapped all day long. A flower pot falls from the sky and hits her, causing a car accident for no reason. If you eat fish, your throat will get stuck with fish bones, and you will be tracked by a pervert. It's Chi-hee. It was he who brought Chi-yu back to the Chi family, sheltered Ning-jin from disaster, and served as Ning-jin's replacement ghost for 17 years. It's not that Chi-yu is neurotic and blindly believes in a book, concluding that the uncle who has been doting on him for many years is a demon. It is true that this book has no details and flawlessly records all the big and small things that have happened around Chi-yu over the past 17 years, including some of her little-known secrets. It is like a god who overlooks the world, not only knowing the past, but also predicting the future. The book bluntly states that Chi-yu will die on his 18th birthday. When Chi-yu saw that line of words, he immediately remembered what the doctor had said. There are still 6 months left. If you have anything you want to do that you haven't done yet, try to be satisfied. Chi-yu felt a chill all over his body. I thought it was fate's trick, but I didn't expect it to be deliberate. Chi-hee, her dear uncle. How cruel is he to do such a despicable thing? Chi-yu forced himself to calm down. She repeatedly told herself that the top priority was not to startle the snake with the grass, but to first figure out who her biological parents were, where the black-hearted Taoist who had calculated Ning-jin's life was, and to do everything possible to help him untie the curse on her body. Chi-yu can't stay calm at all. No one can pretend to be indifferent after learning that their life has entered the countdown. Unless he already doesn't want to live. Chi-yu-sheng has a strong will, and she can't wait to investigate herself. She must go find Chi-hee and ask him a question now. The woman beside her twisted her waist like a water snake and leaned against Chi-hee. Her weak and boneless arms climbed onto his shoulder, and seeing that he did not show any signs of annoyance, she was delighted and boldly leaned her face up. Chi-hee, who had a relatively gentle expression the moment before, suddenly changed his face. He pinched the woman's chin, seemingly squinting for a moment before pushing her away from him. Poor quality. The woman heard him frown and whisper. Then she was kicked out. The third member of the Wei family hugged a pure female student and accidentally turned his head. Seeing that Chi-hee was empty next to him, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows and joke, I said he is a flower in the club, at least give him some face. He was feeling dejected. If he hadn't agreed to the appointment in advance, he would have planned to go to the hospital tonight to accompany Chi-yu. That child has a sensitive mind, and Chi-hun is too dull, like a stone, unable to understand people. She shouldn't have been left alone. The more I thought about it, the more I felt like I was losing out on this trip. He couldn't help but mix a hint of anger and displeasure in his voice. A synthetic product that makes a living by selling laughter. What kind of dignity do you want? He is rarely so aggressive. Wei-san was taken aback for a moment, thinking of something, and the smile on his lips became meaningful. I made a slip of the tongue and was fined 3 drinks. He went to pour wine, but he put on his suit and stood up. Tonight is all mine, you guys play. I have something to do, let's take a step first. Wei-san was about to say something when a familiar bell rang. Someone was singing loudly nearby, breaking the gong and causing a buzzing sound in their ears. Strangely enough, Wei-san heard the bell. As one of Chi-he's few friends, Wei-san knows that this ringtone is only for one person. The cold expression on Chi-he's face melted after receiving Chi-yu's call. He laughed and looked at the innocent female student standing beside him with a clearly defined and handsome face. You air. When his gentle voice sounded, Chi-he had already walked out of the private room. Chi-yu's voice was no different from usual. When she asked Chi-he where he was, he instinctively lied. In the company. I'll go find you. Chi-he's eyelids twitched and his tone suddenly became stern. You're still sick. You'll have a major surgery in 2 days, so you can't run around. Be obedient and go back to the hospital. Uncle will go to the hospital to find you now. Chi-yu lied, I have already boarded the car. Actually, she just got off the elevator. Where's Chi-hun? Chi-he's voice fell low, clearly angered. Now is not the time to deal with Chi-hun, Chi-yu continued to lie, I have disbanded him. Uncle, wait for me, I will be at the company soon. He really has nothing to do with her. It takes at least half an hour from the club to the company, while the hospital is only a 20-minute walk from the company. Chi-he couldn't hurry back to tell his lie, so he had to confess to Chi-yu, I'm at the long nightclub. You ask the driver to drive slowly, and I'll wait for you here. Don't worry. Chi-yu didn't understand why Chi-he was lying, but now she can't care so much. After promising Chi-he that she would pay attention to safety, she hung up the phone. 15 minutes later, downstairs from the long nightclub. Chi-yu ran towards Chi-he with the book in his hand. She ran so fast that she almost fell over. The well-controlled emotions along the way collapsed completely at the moment of seeing Chi-he. Chi-he nervously walked towards Chi-yu and said, I'm not asking you to slow down. After seeing Chi-yu's bright red eyes, he swallowed all the remaining words. Chi-he lowered his face and said, Who bullied you? Isn't that you, you forced kidnapper? Chi-yu waved Chi-he's hand and pointed to the book, sternly asking him, How do you explain this? Chi-he looked at the book in her hand. Aurora Flame is the highest winning work of this year's literary award. The content of the book is not obscure or difficult to understand, and the article is humorous and witty, suitable for reading by all ages. He thought Chi-yu would like it, so he specifically instructed his subordinates to buy a book and send it to her. I didn't expect to make her unhappy. Uncle made a mistake in his judgment. You doesn't like it. Can I replace it with something else for you? A normal person gets angry with Chi-he over a book, and he has long been angry. Only Chi-yu can be patiently comforted by him. The evidence is conclusive, why is he still pretending to be foolish with her without changing his face? Chi-yu was almost furious and slammed the book back into Chi-he's arms. His voice became extremely sharp with anger. Chi-he. You are asterisk asterisk. You are asterisk asterisk, why should I do? I want asterisk asterisk you. Chi-he. You're committing a crime. You bastard, why should I be Ning Jin's replacement ghost? I want to call the police and catch you. Chi He. What's wrong with you? Is it a prank? In a fit of anger, Chi didn't notice anything was wrong. She glared at Chi He in anger, but he still spoke hard and refused to admit his wrongdoing. As his head heated up, he raised his hand and slapped him in the face. Chi He tilted his head and froze for half a minute before turning his face. He frowned slightly and looked at Chi Yu, who was clearly abnormal. He asked in a deep voice, what exactly happened? Chi Yu collapsed, and she couldn't help but burst into tears. I just want an answer, Chi He. Can you stop pretending? Tell me, who are my biological parents? Chi suddenly realized that there seemed to be something wrong. She looked at Chi He with a gloomy expression and tried to open her mouth, saying, asterisk 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 dot. Does Ning Jin know that she is the miss of the Chi family? In the darkness, there seemed to be a force controlling Chi Yu, preventing her from revealing the contents of the book. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Uncle is truly kind. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Uncle is truly kind. The hope that had just ignited for a while was extinguished like this. Chi Yu didn't understand why it was himself. There are so many people in the world, why is it that one's luck is so bad? Go back to the hospital with Uncle. In a long silence, Chi He extended his hand to Chi Yu, his voice carrying a hint of comfort. Although I don't know what happened, Chi Yu's condition is clearly not right. Chi He thinks it's necessary to take Chi Yu back for a full body examination. Chi Yu is not sick, she just knows the truth about being deceived. What to do next, Chi Yu hasn't figured it out yet. But at this moment, she didn't want to see Chi He's thoughtful face again. Chi Yu retreated and turned around, but almost ran into a speeding car. If it weren't for Chi He forcefully pulling her back, a car accident would have been inevitable. The Audi owner lowered the car window, originally intending to curse loudly, but when he saw Chi He and Chi Yu, he changed his respectful face. Sir, Mississippi. Chi Hun sat in the car with a somewhat uneasy expression. Chi Yu saw Ning Jin sleeping in the passenger seat and instantly understood what Chi Hun was talking about as an important matter. The irritability that had nowhere to vent all night finally caught the vent. Chi Yu asked Chi Hun to get off the car. Chi Hun's face showed embarrassment and said, Miss, Ning Jin has been drugged. You are my bodyguard. Damn her. Chi Yu roared angrily at him. Her anger suddenly came, not only Chi Hun, but also Chi He's eyes were startled. Chi Hun has been following Chi Yu for so many years and has seen her coquettish, domineering, and arrogant, but he has never seen her become so arrogant. He dared not say more and opened the car door to get out. Just as my foot landed, I was slapped twice. Chi Hun lowered his head and received it without any complaints. Do you know why I hit you? Chi Yu spoke coldly. Chi Hun replied, I shouldn't have killed before reporting. Originally, this was the standard answer. But after Chi Yu saw that book, the answer changed. As a bodyguard, your responsibility is just one thing. To protect the safety of your employer. My uncle is paying you a salary to protect me, not to make you do private work, understand? Ning Jin was almost drugged lightly, but Chi Hun came to save him. In Chi Yu's mouth, it became an irrelevant phrase to do personal work. Chi Hun clenched his fists tightly, hiding the dissatisfaction in his heart, and said dully, I understand. Chi Yu is too lazy to care whether he is willing or not. After all the fuss, she was also tired and asked Chi Hun to take her back to the hospital. Chi Hun opened the back seat door for her. Chi Yu stood and looked at him with a smile on his face, aren't those 2 slaps painful enough? My car, do you want me to sit in the back? Her intention is to get Ning Jin off the car. Chi-hun tightened his grip on the car door, his handsome and resolute face twisted slightly due to patience. Miss, Ning Jin also needs to go to the hospital, why don't we? Give you 3 seconds, throw her down, Chi-yu interrupted impatiently. Chi-hun stood frozen in place. Let Ning Jin get off the car. After being on the background board for a while, Chi-he spoke up, and in Chi-hun's incredulous gaze, he added, I'll take her to the hospital. Chi-yu let out a sneer and said, Uncle, you are truly kind. She is so persistent that it is really repulsive. However, Chi-he did not get angry. Chi-yu actually wanted him to get angry, so she had reason to mock him for being even better towards the daughter of a cook than her own niece. Chi-he is always more tolerant of Chi-yu than others. If you doesn't want me to know anything, then I won't ask for the time being and will come see you another day. Chi-yu's response was to throw up the car door and coldly urge Chi-hun to drive. After confirming that Chi-yu's car had gone far, Chi-he drove the driver out of the car and stared at Ning Jin's calm and uneasy face, coldly saying, When are you going to install it? Ning Jin opened her eyes, as if frozen by the icy expression on Chi-he's face. She shrank her neck and timidly shouted, Uncle. If Chi-yu were here at this moment, he would definitely feel even cooler. About half a year ago, Ning Jin learned from Chi-he that she was not the daughter of the cook, but the eldest daughter of the Chi family. At that time, she was overjoyed and thought she was about to fly up to the branch and become a phoenix. As a result, Chi-he told her that she had to pretend for another year. It wasn't until the day she turned 18 that the Chi family announced her true identity. Why is there such a deadline? Under Ning Jin's repeated questioning, Chi-he revealed the distant truth. Ning Jin is not grateful at all to Chi-yu. Yes, she helped herself fend off 17 years of disasters, but she also enjoyed 17 years of pampering as a wealthy lady. On the other hand, I have been following a servant and cook since I was young. Although I have no worries about food and clothing, compared to Chi-yu, who is pampered and uses famous brands for food and clothing, I am like an ugly duckling beside a white swan. So inconspicuous and shabby. Ning Jin feels aggrieved. Not willing. She couldn't bear it for 6 months and couldn't wait to gradually replace Chi-yu's position. You know Chi-hun came back today, so he deliberately acted this one. Chi-he stated a fact and did not give Ning Jin a chance to refute it. He then asked her, Do you remember what I told you 6 months ago? Ning Jin pretended to be obedient and said, You made me endure, you can't show any signs. Uncle, actually you misunderstood me. I was deceived by my classmates into singing, and they tampered with the drink. I was afraid, so I asked Chi-hun for help. Seeing Chi-he's cold face unmoved, she gritted her lips and added, You can't blame me. It was Chi-hun who told me that as long as I was in danger, he would come and protect me at any time. Chi-he gave Ning Jin a chance. Originally, as long as she admitted her mistake and claimed that she had been obsessed for a while, he was prepared to persuade herself not to pursue it. After all, they are teenagers with childish behavior and always want to do something to attract attention, which is understandable. But Ning Jin seems to take herself too seriously. Who is Chi-hun's person? Asked Chi-he. Ning Jin didn't realize the danger yet, looking innocent and innocent. Brother Chi-hun is my uncle's person. Who is he responsible for protecting? Chi-yu. What is Chi-yu's current identity? Ning Jin realized later and sat up slightly straight, his eyes flashing with anger. Miss Chi from the Chi family. What is your identity? Ning Jin gritted her teeth and said, The daughter of a cook. So. Chi-he looked at his niece, who was connected by blood, with no warmth in his eyes, only a cold and stern warning. I'll repeat it to you again. In the past 6 months, it's best for you to be honest and not cause trouble. Otherwise, who exactly is Miss Chi from the Chi family? It's always up to me to say one thing, don't you think? Ning Jin was completely awakened from her drunken ecstasy and apologized to Chi He in fear. "I'm sorry, uncle. I won't dare again in the future. Please forgive me this time. It's really something that can't be put on the table." Chi He impatiently ignored her and asked the driver to drive back to Chi's house. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Chi goes to exhalation and faints. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Chi goes to exhalation and faints. Chi flipped through that book all the way. She carefully recalled Chi He's various reactions and suddenly thought of a possibility. Perhaps Chi He was not pretending. When he saw the book, he had a surprised reaction, but that reaction was not strong. He was surprised that Chi came to him with a book, not the content of the book itself. Could it be that the book he saw in his eyes is not the same as the book he saw in Chi-Yu's eyes? Returning to the hospital, Chi-Yu handed the book to Chi-Hun and asked him to read the content inside. Chi-Hun read the content of Aurora Flame, which is completely different from what Chi-Yu saw. So why Chi-He was that reaction can also be explained. It seems like an invisible force is obstructing Chi-Yu from telling the truth. What does it want to do? Inexplicably letting Chi-Yu know the cruel truth, but not allowing her to break free from fate, can only die for Ning Jin in helplessness. Chi-Yu is like an anxious trapped beast, attempting to reveal the truth to Chi-Hun. The scene in front of Chi-He was repeated, and Chi-Hun looked at her with a misty expression. Even asked if you were sick, miss. Chi-Yu can be healthy. She was completely able to grow up safely without illness or disaster, just like Ning Jin. It was Chi-He who stole her and acted as Ning Jin's replacement ghost. It's better not to let her know the truth, then she will die in ignorance. It's better than now, knowing that one carries artificial misfortune but cannot tear it off, and can only live and die in despair. Chi-Yu felt as if there was a large stone weighing down on her heart, making her gasp for breath. My chest was heavy, my whole body was cold, and I was stunned. I stared tightly at the book in my hand, gritting my teeth. Chi-Hun noticed that something was wrong with her and tentatively said, "Mississippi." Chi-Yu clenched his hands tightly, his eyes wide open, and his whole body fidgeting. Chi-Hun went to help her, and she looked up at him, suddenly spitting out a mouthful of blood. Then he closed his eyes and passed out. Chi-Hun went to call the doctor with blood on his face. The attending doctor touched Chi-Yu's pulse and found it so weak that it almost stopped beating. His usually calm face also couldn't help but show a panicked expression. After half an hour of rescue, Chi-Yu woke up in shock. Upon learning that Chi-Yu was vomiting blood and unconscious, Chi-He rushed to the hospital as soon as possible. Chi-Yu kept his eyes wide open and ignored him no matter how he asked, just lying in bed crying. As a last resort, Chi-He could only call a doctor and give her a sedative injection. What did Chi-Yu do after he returned? Chi-He called Chi-Hun outside the ward to inquire. Chi-Hun talked about the book called Aurora Flame. The young lady asked me to read the content on the first page, read half a page and asked me to stop. Then she snatched the book away and vomited blood. I have read the entire book Aurora Flame by Chi-Yu, which is nothing more than writing about a group of Antarctic explorers who happened during their expedition. He didn't understand what was wrong with this book, which stimulated Chi-Yu like this. Chi-He stood by the hospital bed and read the book again overnight. Chi-Yu woke up in the morning and when he opened his eyes, he saw Chi-He leaning against his seat to take a nap. He is really a tall man, leaning against a wooden chair, looking very aggrieved. Before, Chi-Yu would have felt sorry for him, but now his heart is only cold. That night, Chi-Yu slept restlessly, always waking up and sleeping. When she was sober, she was thinking about how to face Chi-He next. Faced with the culprit who caused her tragic life, she wished he had died in front of her. But reality is cruel. Before finding his biological parents and that damn Taoist, Chi-Yu had to pretend to know nothing. Otherwise, once Chi-He becomes aware of her intentions, Chi-Yu may not be able to survive for 6 months and may be secretly disposed of. Thinking of the madness he went through last night, Chi-Yu couldn't help but feel a wave of fear. If it weren't for that strange noise reduction, would she have been lying in the morgue downstairs now? As far as she knows, the reason why Chi-He was able to pull the already weakened Chi group to its current height in just over a decade was not solely due to his iron-fisted skills. How much blood was in his hands, Chi-Yu is unaware. But the outside world is spreading that any company that opposes the Chi family will have a bad ending. Chi-Yu did not believe that those who died without reason were all unlucky and had an accident. She needs to return to normalcy and calmly seek the truth from Chi-He. Chi-He woke up and was greeted by Chi-Yu's smiling face. "Did Uncle stay with me all night?" Chi-Yu's eyebrows and eyes were relaxed and clear, completely different from the crazy look of yesterday's roaring and cold expression. Chi-He nodded first, then cared for Chi-Yu's body. After hearing her say that he was much better, he hesitated and asked, "Last night?" Chi-Yu took the lead and his face felt a bit uneasy. "Last night, I had a nightmare and woke up to find that there was no one around me. In a state of panic and anxiety, I ran to get angry at Uncle. I'm sorry, Uncle, you blame me. So, it's all Chi-Hun's fault." Chi-He couldn't bear to blame Chi-Yu. "It's my uncle who didn't think carefully. He should be with you. Tomorrow's surgery, my uncle will be outside the operating room, so you doesn't have to be afraid." He was so considerate and gentle that Chi-Yu couldn't help but feel lost. If it weren't for the truthfulness of the content in the book, she wouldn't have doubted that Chi-He's love for her was all fake. After all, he has no flaws in his eyes or expression. But no matter how much you pretend, you will ultimately be acting. Chi-Yu's eyes sparkled, as if Chi-He's words had given her a great sense of security. She affectionately acted coquettishly towards Chi-He and said, "Uncle treats me the best." Actually, Chi-Yu is not worried at all that the surgery will fail. Because the book says that the surgery was very successful. It allowed Chi-Yu's dying body to hold on for another 6 months. Chi-Hun was punished. Chi-He moved his hand and whipped him 10 times. When Chi-Hun returned to the hospital, his footsteps were sluggish, his face turned pale, and he could hardly stand up straight. Chi-Yu watched coldly, feeling only regret. Chi-He took the initiative, otherwise when she was discharged, he would have had to personally beat Chi-Hun. This is not the first time in nearly half a year that Chi-Hun has neglected his duties. He was so absent-minded that he seemed to have forgotten his name and identity. If it weren't for his past loyalty. According to Chi-Yu's temper, a whip is not enough, and he will be punished for 10.5 days and cannot get out of bed. The surgery here has been rescheduled, and Chi-Yu's mentality is better than ever before. "I got off the operating table, but I didn't cry as usual." Chi-He praised Chi-Yu for growing up, but Chi-Yu just smiled, with a smile that was not even in his sight. On the 3rd day after surgery, Chi-Yu lay on the hospital bed flipping through the book, slowly scrolling through the timeline when he suddenly realized in horror that the criminal gang that had kidnapped him 5 years ago had been released from prison. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Unable to escape being bound. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Unable to escape being bound. The summer at the age of 12 was a nightmare that Chi-Yu would never forget for a lifetime. The abandoned water plant, with mice darting under its feet, and a few dried moths hanging from the spider web in the corner. The kidnappers huddled together naked, playing cards, using foul language mixed with their genitals, smelling of feet and sweat. For Chi-Yu, who has a deep obsession with cleanliness, that scene is really disgusting. However, these external factors are nothing. Even after learning that the Chi family would pay a high ransom, the kidnappers still brutally tortured the hostage Chi-Yu. It took 7 days for Chi-Yu to be rescued. Her body was injured multiple times, her mind was greatly stimulated, and she almost went crazy. The psychologist is still conducting regular examinations for Chi-yu to this day. Chi-yu didn't expect that group of people would be released from prison after only 5 years. They were just a little short of receiving the 60 million ransom back then. It was Chi-yu who stole one of the people's phones and reported to the police that they were left penniless and locked up. Given the severity of that person, if he were to be released from prison, he would definitely do everything possible to seek revenge on himself. Although the book does not mention that Chi-yu will be retaliated, she is very uneasy. The sudden and terrifying news put Chi-yu on high alert. She ordered Chi-hun to follow her closely, while nervously biting her fingers and calling Chi-he. Chi-yu used the excuse of having a nightmare and dreamed that the group had been released from prison. He asked Chi-he to arrange 4 strong bodyguards for him. Chi-he actually learned the news earlier than Chi-yu. I kept it from Chi-yu in order not to affect her postoperative recovery. The bodyguard had already been found, and Chi-he from Chi-hun also greeted him in advance, instructing him to be full of energy. Is there no sense of security in the hospital? Chi-yu is eager to return home. As the only person who knows what Chi-yu went through back then, Chi-he fully understands why she is so afraid. He came forward to discuss with the doctor and will officially discharge Chi-yu and return home tomorrow morning. Chi-yu just needs to wait another day. I don't know if finally being able to go home makes Chi-yu feel at ease, emotionally excited, or something. Her heart beats exceptionally fast all day. Chi-hun guarded Chi-yu in the hospital for 10 days, during which he was careful and cautious. Not to mention being a suspicious person, he didn't even see a fly. He was very indifferent to Chi-yu's extreme reaction in his heart, but dared not show any signs. Miss Chi-yu's temper has become increasingly unpredictable in the past 2 years. It's best not to make her angry. With such thoughts in mind, Chi-hun received a video sent to him by Ning-jin on a boring night. In the opera hall of the city's Grand Theater, Ning-jin held a violin and waited for the opportunity to perform on stage for the first time. I'm so nervous. If only Chi-hun could come and be my listener, then I would definitely be very happy. The girl was wearing a pink evening gown with light makeup, looking much more beautiful and charming than usual. The deep anticipation in Ning-jin's eyes turned Chi-hun's heart into tender water. He once heard Ning-jin say that she can play the violin, but never had the opportunity to appreciate it. Chi-yu has already fallen asleep. Perhaps knowing that she could go home tomorrow, she slept incredibly soundly for such a long time without even turning over. Chi-hun is restless and ready to move. He told himself that he would only be away for 3 hours. As soon as time comes, come back immediately. Chi-hun used the excuse of going downstairs to smoke, deceived the bodyguard, and drove away from the hospital. At the moment he drove out of the hospital gate, a van and his Audi car passed by. Chi-hun had no idea that his fate for the rest of his life would slide towards the abyss from this moment on. Before discharge, Miss Chi needs to undergo a final examination. The doctor, wearing a mask and a white coat, arrived at the ward and explained to the bodyguard at the door. The bodyguard stared at the nameplate on his chest for a moment and said thoughtfully, Dr. Shen's voice seems different from during the day. The man rubbed his nose with a very natural attitude. Hi, I was caught in the rain this afternoon and I have a slight cold. It sounds like a strong nasal sound, right? The bodyguard remained silent and his gaze swept over the man's face. The man laughed, and the wrinkles in the corners of his eyes were exactly the same as those of Dr. Shen who had been examining Chi-yu. The bodyguard let go of his guard and smiled, our job is special. We hope Dr. Shen can understand. Yes, where is the responsibility? Speaking, walk to the hospital bed. He called out to Chi-yu several times, but Chi-yu didn't respond. It's broken. The man shouted nervously. The bodyguard heard the commotion and ran into the room nervously, asking, what's wrong? The man lowered his head, his eyes flashed treacherous, took out a bottle of spray from his pocket, and sprayed it on the 4 bodyguards' faces. The bodyguards couldn't even struggle and fell to the ground in a daze. 2 hours ago, Chi-yu was stabbed with a needle. The nurse's hands were particularly stable and her level was significantly better than usual. Chi-yu even praised her exceptional performance. More than 10 minutes later, a strong sense of drowsiness struck. Chi-yu fell asleep. He fell asleep. The man took Chi-yu out of the ward, and someone answered downstairs. He quickly lifted Chi-yu onto the car. At 9 o'clock in the evening. The bodyguard woke up from the ward and searched the entire hospital, but there was no trace of Chi-yu. That group of people deliberately disguised themselves, avoided surveillance, and had a strong anti-reconnaissance awareness. When the bodyguard called Chi-he with a pale face, he had just finished his socializing and was about to rush to the next venue. Upon learning that Chi-yu was missing, Chi-he lowered his face on the spot, completely disregarding the presence of a prominent figure in his entourage. He said, "There is an urgent matter at home," and then took a car and left. Grand Theater. Ning Jin's performance is perfect. After bidding farewell, Chi-hun sent her a bouquet of fresh flowers. The members of the orchestra cast envious glances at Ning Jin, teasing her boyfriend for his handsome appearance. Ning Jin held the flower and smiled shyly, but said, "Don't joke, this is my good brother, not my boyfriend." Upon hearing this, Chi-hun's eyes dimmed for a moment. But the next second, Ning Jin said in a disappointed tone, "Chi-hun may like someone else." Chi-hun felt anxious and quickly retorted, "I don't like others." Everyone cheered and made them just get together. Ning Jin just smiled and enjoyed the sensation of being noticed by the crowd. As for what Chi-hun's thoughts are, she doesn't care at all. Chi-hun is a tool man here in Ningjin. When she needs it, in a few words, bring him over. She didn't need him, and in just a few words, she dismissed him. Chi-hun is a fool who doesn't even know he's being played with and will always fall for it. This is the first time Ning Jin has performed with the ensemble since she entered the ensemble department of Smo High School. She asked Chi-hun to come over, not only to give herself a long face, but also to indirectly tell the ensemble members that she was very popular. The image of a goddess needs to be erected step by step with great effort. In front of her, there was a school grass named Jin Yao who stood up with Chi Yugang, and later a handsome man who laid flowers for her. After today, Ning Jin's reputation in school will only continue to grow. Beyond Chiyu, the day is just around the corner. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Bringing back all must and all tale. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The source has no content or has errors. Chapter 8. She is a pretty little girl. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. She is a pretty little girl. The man, who was in high spirits, took out a lighter without thinking and pressed his hand on the switch. Without exerting any force, he died at the black muzzle of the gun. In the darkness, only a few insignificant muffled noises were heard. The man in the room was excited when his calf suddenly hurt and he screamed and fell to the ground. A slender figure walked towards Chi-yu and said, "I'm sorry, miss, I'm late." Chi-yu's face turned pale as he stared blankly at the handsome man in front of him. After several seconds, she hoarsely called out his name. "Chi Dynasty." Chi Chao nodded at her, and as far as his gaze could see, Chi-yu was disheveled, looking extremely disheveled. His gaze darkened slightly, he turned his face to one side, took off his coat, and put it on for Chi-yu. After finishing all of this, Chi Chao raised his gun and coldly aimed it at the man crawling on the ground, attempting to escape. Before pulling the trigger, Chi-yu's voice sounded behind him. "Let's keep his lowly life for now, take it back, I'll do it myself." She gave a command and Chi Chao made a move. After withdrawing his gun, Chi walked over and casually removed the man's 2 arms, causing him to collapse to the ground and scream in pain. Turning his face, he reported the news to Chi-he and received a reply that he would send someone to handle the aftermath before walking back to Chi-yu's side. Chi Chao asked Chi-yu if he was leaving on his own or if he was holding her onto the car. Upon hearing this, Chi-yu raised his eyes and glared at him, intending to get angry. I don't know what suddenly came to my mind, but my blood-stained lips pursed and I raised my hands with obvious anger. She was wearing Chi Chao's coat, which looked a bit like her boyfriend's coat due to her height and body shape difference. The sleeves were too long, and she reached out her hand, revealing only her pink fingertips. The young lady, who used to be stubborn and coquettish, is now looking at how adorable she is. A faint and imperceptible smile flashed in Chi Chao's eyes, afraid that the young lady would scratch someone, so he didn't dare to show it. He took a step forward, picked up Chi-yu horizontally, walked out of the dilapidated house, and carefully placed her in the car. When they went out, they inevitably saw the bodies of those few people. Chi Chao deliberately paid attention and found that Chi-yu was staring at those corpses without even blinking his eyes. Even after getting into the car, he sternly reminded him, "Tell them to handle it clean." Chi Chao looked at her sarcastic profile with a somewhat complicated expression in his eyes. He wanted to say something, but felt that in his own capacity, he might not be qualified to say those comforting words. During a moment of thought transition, he only nodded in response and said, "Yes." How could Chi-yu not know the meaning that Chi Chao's eyes were full of? It was only to tell her that he was forced not to appear in person. The Chi family paved the way by giving money to those nobles, which allowed them to flow smoothly and develop into a leading enterprise in the city. 5 years ago, Chi-yu was kidnapped, and with Chi-he's wrist at the time, he could actually handle the man unknowingly in prison. But the man was a relative of a middle-level official at the customs at that time, and unfortunately, a batch of important goods from the Chi family were stuck in the approval process and detained at the dock. No matter how close the relationship was, they were not allowed to be released. The man didn't die, and the goods that had been stuck for 8 days went out smoothly. The profit is 300%, over 2 billion. That year, the Chi family suddenly revived their former glory from the struggling and destitute wealthy family. The top commercial districts that he used to be unable to enter actively approached him and opened up to him. He went from being a humble knocker to a towering presence inside the door, setting rules. Chi-yu, who almost went crazy, received an expensive gift on her 12th birthday. A 1% stake in the group's stock. 5 years later today, the leadership team in the city is changing and should not be in turmoil. He didn't come, only sent Chi Chao. What he means, Chi won't fail to understand. The body must be disposed of without leaving any trace, otherwise it will be uncovered and the benefactor will suffer, and everyone on the chain of interests will not be able to live a better life. Chi said this sentence, how thoughtful it is. I just don't know what gift he will give her as compensation this time. If it's still stocks, then it's ridiculous. Chi is a counterfeit. On his 18th birthday, when he died, the stock fell into the hands of Ning Jin, the legitimate eldest daughter of the Chi family. It's equivalent to Chi narrowly escaping twice and making wedding clothes for Ning Jin. It has to be said that he truly deserves to be the darling of financial magazines. This business acumen, even though Steve Jobs is still alive, should feel inferior. At midnight, Chi was taken back to the hospital. She hasn't been hurt like this for a long time, even the attending doctor who has always kept her emotions hidden shows pity. A white coat was wrapped around the edge of the hospital bed, and Chi lay expressionless. When they were treating those bleeding wounds for her, she didn't even cry. Chi has a lot to ponder over. For example, why would Chi Hun let that man take her away under his nose? Did he stay by the bed during her slumber? For example, how can we torture that man to vent her years of heartache and hatred? Chi has varying degrees of bruising all over her body, and her skin is delicate, making her prone to subcutaneous bleeding. The man punched and kicked her, leaving unsightly purple and black marks on her entire back and legs. At least a month, she won't want to wear a dress anymore. He had been anxiously guarding outside the ward, and the doctor came out to inquire about Chi-Yu's situation as soon as possible. The doctor took off his mask and shook his head. "Mr. Chi, let me just say that even a person who is iron-struck cannot resist such occasional struggles, especially since she is a delicate little girl. If conditions permit, send more people to protect her." He gritted his teeth and didn't respond to the sound, waiting for the doctor's answer. There were only a few skin injuries, but she was severely beaten and had almost no good parts on her body. She had a slight concussion and 2 broken ribs. She will be preparing to enter the operating room later. The operating room is like another home for Chi-Yu. She may spend more time inside than the usual number of times girls go to the amusement park to play. He pushed the door open and didn't know how to face Chi-Yu. Chi-Yu lifted his head and waved to him with a smile. Halfway through the call, I didn't know where the injury was, and my face turned pale. "Don't move." He walked quickly to the bed and carefully put Chi-Yu's hand back. Chi-Hi's eyes turned red as he looked as if he was really worried about Chi-Yu. The doctor notified him to enter the operating room in 20 minutes, but Chi-Yu didn't have time to talk to Chi-Hi about anything else, so he said 3 words. "Uncle, don't blame yourself. Chi-hun, don't deal with him for the time being. Let's talk about it after I recover from my injuries. Also, keep that man with me. Chi-Chow is good. I want him to stay with me for a while. What do you think, uncle? Chi-Yu is like this now. Even if he wants the stars in the sky, Chi-Hi will find a way to get them for her. There is no reason why he cannot agree. You can do whatever you want, uncle." Chi-Yu comfortingly patted the back of his hand, like a dragonfly skimming water, without any warmth. "It's okay, uncle. I understand your difficulties." Chi-Hi felt very unhappy in his heart, and he hoped that Chi-Yu could slap him hard like half a month ago to vent his anger. It's better than being so sensible, like pricking a needle in his heart. Chi-Yu is not a sensible person. She hides all her grievances in her heart, using retreat as a means of progress, making Chi-Hi feel guilty towards her. When guilt accumulates to a certain extent, it becomes a manageable weakness. The more Chi-Hi feels sorry for Chi-Yu, the more advantageous it is for Chi-Yu. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Advanced Pet Dogs. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Advanced Pet Dogs. In just half a month, Chi-Yu narrowly escaped twice. I don't know from what channel the Jean family heard about the incident with Chi-Yu. Madame Jean, with her delicate appearance, led the reluctant Jean Yao and carried many expensive gifts to visit the hospital. Last time, Chi-Yu made it clear that he wanted to terminate his engagement with the Jean family. The Jean couple was extremely frightened. They thought it was just a common child argument, but they didn't expect it to cause Chi-Yu to become so angry. Chi-Hi didn't even pay attention to the Jean family and unilaterally notified the 2 families that their engagement had been cancelled. They didn't meet, they just said it over the phone. Jean Yao's father almost knelt down on the phone and whispered to Chi-Hi to give Jean Yao another chance. After going home and beating Jean Yao hard, he went to apologize in front of Chi-Hi with a blue nose and swollen face. The matter of terminating the engagement is considered a temporary abandonment. Mrs. Jean is much more polite than last time she came. Be careful with your butt against the chair. Chi-Yu raised her eyes a little, then she stood up and earnestly asked if Chi-Yu wanted to drink water and how about peeling an apple for her to eat. Chi-Yu was filled with anger and worried that there was nowhere to go. These 2 mother and son were brought to the door. Upon careful consideration, last time she was so angry that she didn't do anything when she was admitted to the hospital. It was really too cheap for them. Chi-Yu didn't respond and left Madame Jean alone. When her face became embarrassed, Jean Yao, who was originally sitting on a chair playing with his phone, stood up and looked over with a displeased expression before casually saying, "Auntie, do you still remember Ning Jean?" Before Lady Jean could say anything, Jean Yao shouted impatiently, "Chi-Yu. If you're not feeling well, just come at me and don't bring anyone unrelated in." Unrelated people. Ha. It's really funny. Chi-yu was too lazy to bother with him and said to Lady Jean, actually, last time was not a big deal. You know, I have a hobby of collecting limited edition items. She blinked her eyes, looking quite distressed. For the limited edition, the fewer people around me, the better. Jin Yao knew I had a pair of running shoes, and he bought the same pair for Ning Jin. How can I wear them in the future? Mrs. Jean doesn't know anything about Ning Jin. This lowly dead girl is no longer standing between Chi-yu and Jin Yao, destroying their already decent relationship. Madame Jean actually started thinking about cooking Ning Jin as soon as she realized something was wrong. If it weren't for Jin Yao's hunger strike at home, forcing her to swear that she would never take action against Ning Jin. That cheap hoof should have been taken to a remote and impoverished place long ago. Where could there be today's trouble? You, rest assured that auntie and uncle have strictly controlled Jin Yao's pocket money, and such incidents will never happen again in the future. Madame Jean almost flattered Chi-yu. Chi-yu looked up at Jin Yao, who was clenching his fists and glaring at her with gritted teeth. Seeing him unhappy, she instantly became happy. Auntie really hurts me. In the blink of an eye, Chi-yu put on a cute face and shook Mrs. Jin's hand affectionately. When I am discharged from the hospital this time, my aunt and uncle must come home to have a meal. She said this, which should indicate that her anger has dissipated. Mrs. Jean felt a big stone fall to the ground in her heart, and she didn't feel so anxious anymore. She said a few more words of personal concern. Auntie, I want to have a few words with Jin Yao alone, Chi-yu said in a coquettish voice as the conversation changed. Madame Jean stood up eagerly and said, Auntie, take a look downstairs. You don't have to worry, just chat more. Jin Yao watched as Mrs. Jean left the room, confirming that she had indeed walked away. He walked to the edge of the hospital bed, his handsome face full of disgust. What else would you do besides talk about the engagement between the two families and threaten me? Chi-yu curled his lips and said, there are so many things you can do. Do you want to see them? Jin Yao. He recalled the fierce intent in his mother's eyes just now, worried that she would cause trouble for Ning Jin. His lips pursed, and he couldn't bear it. He apologized to Chi-yu, I'm sorry, I didn't think twice last time, and I won't do that again in the future. Chi-yu raised his eyebrows slightly, waiting for his next message. Ning Jin is innocent. I hope that when my mother comes up later, you can tell her to let go of Ning Jin. I don't, Chi-yu replied to him in an indecisive tone. Jin Yao felt that he had already compromised enough. Chi-yu is so domineering, it's really bullying. He stared at Chi-yu, with a strong hatred rising in his eyes. His fists clenched and he suddenly reached out to pinch Chi-yu. Chi-yu reacted quickly and slapped him in the face. Jin Yao turned his head, his fierce aura fading like a tide, and a cold sweat broke out on his back. When he woke up, he realized what a terrible thing he had just done. He should apologize to Chi-yu. But the young man's self-esteem made him unable to open his mouth no matter what. Do you feel humiliated? The girl's voice was clear and crisp, like a wind chime under the eaves. In the moment the wind blew, it jingled, very pleasant, and also very cold. Jin Yao looked at Chi-yu and thought of an excellent word to describe her. The venomous snake and scorpion beauty. Although they look as delicate and beautiful as porcelain dolls, they make people want to stay away without any intimate thoughts. Chi-yu lifted the blanket and swayed his legs by the bed, his snow-white feet swaying. She smiled and spoke words, but it made Jin Yao shiver all over. Who made you unlucky? Born into the Jin family, you are destined to bear the heavy responsibility of revitalizing the family. You have to coax me. If you can't stand, just kneel down. Kneeling down, I am happy. The Jin family can only have a good year. Saying it's my fiancé is actually a high-end pet dog. You must pretend to be foolish and pretend to be foolish about things that we both know well, forcing me to pierce through that layer of paper, making everyone so embarrassed. Do you think I will continue to pretend to treat you as a person or tie a rope around your neck in the future? The room was as silent as death. Jin Yao's self-esteem was trampled underfoot by Qiyu, tossed and turned, crushed and wasted, completely unrecognizable. He couldn't speak, with a lump of ice stuck in his throat and his whole body stiff. Qiyu looked at him with a compassionate expression and said, "Tell me, do you want to be a person or a dog?" Jin Yao's head was almost broken in front of his chest, and he saw Qiyu's feet, whose skin was like condensed fat, carved in powder and jade, crystal clear and beautiful. The alternative proposition has no third answer. Jin Yao bent down his knee, knelt on one knee, grabbed Qiyu's foot, put her on slippers, and his tone was unexpectedly calm. "The weather is nice today, go out and sunbathe." He spread out his palm facing upwards, in a handshake posture. Only two people will hold hands. Servants, dogs, and the like can only face up and wait to help their masters. Qiyu smiled, but instead of holding his hand, he hooked his wrist and left the hospital room. Neither of them knew that Ning Jin would come to the hospital at this time. So as they walked out of the room, their faces met in surprise. Qiyu's surprise was just surprise. Jin Yao's surprise was tinged with panic. Ning Jin's surprise came from their intimate behavior. Isn't Jin Yao tired of Qiyu? Why would he allow her to get close to him? End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Are they two garbage paired? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Are they two garbage paired? Ning Jin was very proud that she had snatched Jin Yao from Qiyu's hands in less than 2 years. She was fishing for Jin Yao without hesitation, and everyone felt that they had already exchanged feelings. But actually not. Until today, despite Jin Yao confessing to Ning Jin several times, she never let go of her promise to be together. It's not about taking someone else's boyfriend's reputation on a moral level that doesn't sound good, but simply from the perspective of playing hard to get. Jin Yao is a person who enjoys challenges, and for him, what he can't get is the best. Ning Jin has always believed that she controls the overall situation. But right now, she's a bit panicked. Jin Yao is stubborn and rebellious. As long as he believes in something, 10 cows cannot be pulled back. Qiyu fainted in front of him, and he didn't even blink. The degree of disgust is evident. How could it be that after just over 10 days, I am willing to let Qiyu help me walk? His expression was calm, although not enthusiastic, he did not resist. Jin Yao instinctively wanted to withdraw his hand, but as soon as the thought flashed through his mind, he extinguished it on his own. Do you want to be a person or a dog? He stiffened into a sculpture and forced a smile at Ning Jin, saying, "Why did you come?" Ning Jin, who was more patient than him, picked up the insulation bucket in his hand as if nothing had happened and said lightly, "Miss injured her ribs. My mother cooked pork bone soup and asked me to bring it, hoping to make up for her." Qiyu pondered the undercurrents between the two, feeling like a vicious female supporting character in a dog's blood story who had torn apart a suffering mandarin duck. Ning Jin saw that Qiyu had no intention of speaking, so she planned to send the insulation bucket to the ward. Just as he stepped out, he was coldly stopped by Qiyu. "Take it away, it seems you have a bad memory." "I forgot that I hate drinking broth the most." Ning Jin stopped and bit her lips, feeling a bit sad as she said, "Mom set 5 alarm clocks and stayed up for most of the night." At least it was a heartfelt gesture. "Miss, how much would you like to drink?" Qiyu seemed to have heard a joke and sneered, "Why should I feel wronged for her pitiful heart?" After hearing Ning Jin's words, normal people would probably reluctantly say, "Let's take a bite." After all, it's not good to ruin others' intentions. Qiyu is obviously not an ordinary person. She grew up being pampered by the whole family, and she must get what she likes. If she doesn't like it, no one can force it onto her. Ning Jin's slender fingers tightly grasped the handle of the insulation bucket, seemingly casually glancing at Jin Yao. That helpless and pitiful gaze is lovable. Jin Yao couldn't help but cry for Ning Jin's mother. Aunt Zhao also cares about you, otherwise. Chi Yu withdrew his hand from Jin Yao's arm and looked up at him with a smile on his face. You don't want to sunbathe again. Jin Yao felt like he had become a kite in Chi Yu's hand, and she could easily control her emotions. Hardly suppressing the surging displeasure in his heart, Jin Yao twitched his lips and said, "Let's go." He reached out his hand again, but Chi Yu didn't take it. She walked forward on her own, and as she passed by Ning Jin, she smiled and congratulated. The concert was very successful. You were very happy, weren't you? Ning Jin's pupils narrowed for a moment, remembering that Chi Hun had been sitting restlessly these past few days. She couldn't help but nervously turn her head to look at Chi Yu. Chi Yu didn't give her a glance, as if that sentence was just her talking to herself. Jin Yao only had time to hastily appease Ning Jin with a, "Don't be sad," and then he chased after Chi Yu with a hint of impatience. Ning Jin watched them disappear at the entrance of the elevator, feeling as if something was about to break away from her control, with a hint of unease in her heart. Silence thrives in the enclosed elevator. Jin Yao opened his mouth and closed it several times. Chi Yu felt a bit amused at his agonizing expression. Sure enough, he was scared by what she said in the ward. If it had been before, he would have been clamoring to defend Ning Jin. Ask, Chi Yu's tone was faint. Jin Yao won the gold medal for avoiding death, and originally intended to directly ask her why she had so much hostility towards Ning Jin's mother. After thinking for a moment, I asked a tactful question. Why don't you like to drink broth? He grew up with Chi Yu, and I still remember that she didn't have any dietary restrictions. When she was a child, she liked to drink soup made from yam, pork ribs, and corn. How big it is, it has changed its taste instead. Chi Yu was surprised that he asked himself this. Speaking of broth, it was a very unpleasant memory. The elevator door opened and Chi Yu walked out first. Jin Yao thought she wouldn't respond to him, but he saw Chi Yu stop and look at him. Do you still remember the snowball? Jin Yao's expression was bewildered, and Chi Yu's tone mocked. I don't even remember the gifts I sent out. Did I get senile dementia in advance? Being scolded for his bad memory, Jin Yao didn't care about getting angry. He remembered, was it the little rabbit I gave you when I was 12 years old? Chi Yu looked at Ning Jin coming out of the elevator behind him with a cold expression and said, I have been raising it for 3 years, but it was accidentally stewed by Aunt Zhao in your mouth. You didn't tell me what it was, saying that eating it can nourish my body. I vomited for 2 days. At this point, Ning Jin had already walked up to him. Chi Yu deliberately lowered his voice. She had no idea what Chi Yu was talking to Jin Yao. The sense of crisis prompted Ning Jin to do something to make Jin Yao, who was clearly not right, unconditionally protect her as before, instead of standing by Chi Yu's side. Jin Yao, your homework book is at my house. We'll be together later. Jin Yao's heart was filled with fire, and he twisted his eyebrows to interrupt Ning Jin. Aunt Zhao doesn't know if Snowball is the pet I gave to Chi Yu. How could it be so absurd as to stew it? Ning Jin was dumbfounded when asked. Out of the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of the sneer on Chi Yu's face and realized that she had been calculated. Ning Jin harbored a deep hatred in her heart, but quickly developed panic and guilt on her face. In no time, tears filled my eyes. Yes, I'm sorry. Miss was seriously ill at that time, and my mother was also worried about her. She listened to folk remedies and did something foolish. Although I knelt for 2 days and Miss didn't forgive my mother, since 4 years have passed and Miss hasn't calmed down yet, then I. Her body softened, her knees touching the ground, and her expression was very embarrassed. Why don't you kneel down this time and forgive me, Mississippi? Although Jin Yao was angry about Ning Jin's mother's actions, he did not want Ho Ning Jin to be humiliated in the bustling hospital. He helped Ning Jin up and watched her wipe her tears. He had no intention of blaming her, only focused on her heartache. Since everything is over and Auntie realizes her mistake, then let's forget about it. Ning Jin bit her lip and carefully glanced at Chiyu, saying with a mosquito-like expression, I just don't know what Miss thinks. Jin Yao turned around and Chiyu smiled, harmless and even a bit gentle. But her words made Jin Yao and Ning Jin suddenly change their faces. I think your mother is an ex. She didn't peel, cramp, and stew your mother to avenge the snowball. It's not allowed by law, otherwise you would have lost your mother now, do you know? Dare to force her to say anything to forgive, are they too garbage worthy? End of this chapter.